Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be able to participate in this celebration. I thought I would just give you a couple of little vignettes to give you some sense of the importance that SYA has had for me in my life. So I grew up wanting to learn languages. It was because my brother had bought these Spanish records. And when I was a kid, we used to listen to them and go, "Hola, ¿cómo estás? Muy bien, gracias. ¿Y tú?" Bien, gracias. And I said, I would just love to really be able to speak Spanish for real and not just, repeat what was on a record. So when I ended up at Exeter, and I ended up as a junior there. I came in my midway through junior year. And at the time, I was more proficient in French, so I did my language requirements in French. And in the fall of my senior year, Mr. Bagia, who was also my advisor, is one of the Spanish teachers, said, you finished all your requirements and everything. Why don't you go to Spain second semester? I'm like, okay, sure. And so he said, and then a few days later, he said, Exeter has arranged to pay the difference between the tuitions. And, talk about a Don Corleone, type of offer, right? I said, I basically had to do this. So when I got to Spain, it was just an incredible experience. I'd been to Europe before. I'd studied for 6 weeks in France when I was in ninth grade. But this was just incredible. There were three things that were responsible for me really getting the most out of SYA. One of them you've heard, Angel Villalta. He was incredible. I mean, he was many things to us, but one of the things that he was this incredible sociologist. And he would just tell us who we are. He would just look at us with that sort of ire sometimes and just say, this is what you American students are. Here's the way you behave. And one of the things that he pointed out to me was just, and it's really obvious now, but it wasn't at the time. He says, you Americans, you're so back like this. You have your space. Like your no-fly zone is like this, right? And in Spain, the no-fly zone is like this. People get close to you because you aren't like that. You're just so different. The second person was Mr. Ciannotti, who was the director of the school at the time. And one of the things that he used to do in class was he would ask you a question. In particular, he was a linguist as well. He spoke Spanish, Italian, and French, just like Mr. Bagia, who was back at Exeter there. And in class, he would say, un duro, a 5 peseta piece, if you could come up with the cognate for a Spanish word or an English word, that he came up with. And in times, because he knew that I spoke French, he would really test me and prod me, to make me sort of make the links and sort of use not only what I was learning in Spanish, but also what I had learned in French. And then the other part was my Spanish brother, Jorge Sagnier, who was just out of this world. I was 17, he was 14. And when I got to the house the first day, he said, hi, I am Jordi Sagnier, your Spanish brother. I said, me llamo Emery, he said, mucho gusto, And so he said, can I ask you something? I said, sure. He said, why don't you have any Levi's? and I said, I don't know. He said, no, I know you don't have any. I've been through all your clothes. Right? And he said, you have J.C. Penney's or Sears? And he said, you also don't have Converse. I mean, he was a student of American culture, and he figured, here's a piece of American culture, and it's not going to tell me about any things that I want to learn about or that I think are important, right? And then he said to me, he said, and he used to always want to talk. He used to push me. We have to talk. We want to talk. And he'd say, Mamá, no quiere hablar. He'd say, I need to talk to him. I need to know things, right? So because of that, we were always talking, I became very, very proficient in Spanish. And he had two topics, American clothes, and the other things were American girls. He'd go, Emery, tell me about American girls. I said, I can't tell you about American girls. And then I said there were three. There was a fourth component as well. I played basketball with a Spanish basketball team when I was there. I played with the La Salle Bonanova. So one of the things that happened was after school, I didn't hang out with the American kids. I had to go to basketball practice. And then on weekends, we had games. So I spent the time traveling around all over Spain, playing competitively. I was kind of like the sort of young American ringer there, supposed to help them help them win the championship. It was very, very enlightening, sort of traveling around like this and meeting people. And I was telling Rick just a minute ago about an experience I had in Sabadell, where we played one of our first games. And after the game, we had a team dinner. And at the team dinner, it was in this small restaurant. Sabadell is, a small town, not too far from Barcelona. And Santi, who was one of the team members, says, "Emery, everybody in the restaurant is looking at you." And I looked around, and they were. Everybody was like, let's just say African Americans weren't a dime a dozen in Spain at the time, And so I just got up and went, hi. But it was very enlightening. It was telling me something. It was telling me something about people being curious and just looking at something or someone that they hadn't seen before. So I'll fast forward a bit. So I went to college at Harvard, and I started off majoring in Romance language, and I actually switched in my junior year to applied mathematics. I decided I wanted to study statistics and get a PhD in statistics. And so I made the switch, but I realized I needed to learn more math because I was going to go to medical school too. So I decided I wanted to study, and I had something else, another goal I wanted to accomplish. I didn't like the fact that American intellectuals only speak one language, which was English. And I really wanted to round out my French. So I studied mathematics in France, in Grenoble, after I graduated from Harvard. And a lot of the learning techniques for learning Spanish I used when I was there in France. So I came back, MD PhD program, went on to internship, and then did my residency in anesthesiology. So I'll just give a parenthetical insert here. So Pauline was talking about Oliver Wendell Holmes. So Holmes was like the house of modern intellectual medicine, at the time, in his day. And he gave us another very important contribution, which was the term anesthesia he coined. Because after William Morton gave the first public demonstration of anesthesia at Mass General Hospital in 1846, October 16th, he wrote a letter to Holmes. You can find this letter and the response on the web. And Holmes, because the phenomenon hadn't been defined yet. And what he did was he said, maybe we should call it anesthesia, from the Greek, no sensation. And he was actually rather pensive about it. He went through a couple of other terms like neurolepsia and a few other things. And he said, whatever term we pick, we have to choose it carefully because it's going to have impact sort of now and forevermore. So I just thought I'd point that out, close parenthesis. So again, this idea that he had these insights that went beyond just his cultural insights allowed him to have enormous impact in medicine. So I practice as an anesthesiologist now. I spend most of my time doing science. I look for any excuse I can to use my languages. They present themselves very readily at the hospital because, as ironic as it may seem, we still don't have the sort of translation facilities that we should have for all the languages. And many times, it's often very, very difficult to take care of Spanish-speaking patients, as incredible as this may sound, in a major hospital like Mass General. And when I come up and I take care of my patients in Spanish, people think, "Oh, wow, you speak Spanish." I'm like, "Oh, well, there are people who actually speak more than one language. More of us should do that, It's viewed as being something which is exceptional, when in point of fact it should just be, a given. And we were talking, we've mentioned a few times this idea of cultural competence. And in medicine now, there's this thing of trying to get teams to work together better. Like in my case, the surgeons working with the anesthesiologists, working with the nurses. And it's talking about what it likes to form and function as a team. And one of the things that I realize is that when you've gone through the SYA experience, you've actually played the role of the other person. You've actually put yourself in a situation where you had to be part of the culture and actually try to act within that culture and develop proficiencies in that culture. And in the cultural competency that we talk about now, at least in the hospital, it's just like learning to respect the other person's position, which is very difficult if you can't really put yourself in that position. And I think that's the thing which I think all of us would agree that, being an SYA, has given us. And too often we have bickering matches at faculty at MIT, there also at Mass General. And this little bubble goes off over my head when you see them, and people just having difficulty seeing the points of the other people. It just says, you guys didn't do school year abroad. Thank you.